Hey everybody, thanks for coming to check out today's video. I am starting a really big project. I am going to turn this 250-gallon oil tank into a smoker. Well, technically it'll turn into like a mobile patio at the end, but that's way down the line. We'll get back to that. Today I am going to cut the door, get it burned out so I can actually start working on it. So I asked a good buddy to come and help me out. So today, my buddy Patrick is here to help me do all this because honestly, I just needed real adult supervision for it. So let's show you how we did it.
To start this out, we're cutting off 2 of the old leg brackets because they are in the way of where I want, the door to go. And even if they weren't, they wouldn't look good for what I want this to look like in the end anyway. So we're getting those cut off. We'll grind everything smooth so the door will look good. I'm going to be leaving the other 2 on though, because later on I am going to actually put a little shelf on the front of this just for another place to, set stuff down. With that all cleaned up, I am going to go through and put the layout for where I am going to cut the door. I'm coming in 3 inches on the ends to make sure that I stay away from the caps where the seam is actually welded for the tank ends. But for the top line, I did kind of just wing it because the tank is kind of flat before it goes into the radius. So my idea was try and go right at the beginning of the radius, so hopefully it looks good. And to make sure that I didn't lean super far one way or the other, I asked Patrick to help me put this line on so the door didn't come out super crooked. You would hope I would catch it before I cut it, but crazier things have happened. To cut the tank, we moved it out into the main part of the shop because I didn't want to risk this thing starting on fire and something bad happening, so we moved it to a much wider open space because we were a little nervous because when we picked it up to bring it out here, we realized that it wasn't completely empty. We ended up getting about 3 gallons of oil out, and Patrick asked me, I thought it was empty. And the only thing I really had for a response for him was, well, it's a 250-gallon tank, so 3 gallons in relative terms is pretty empty. We stood around for a little while trying to figure out what the best way to cut the sides would be since the layout is too far in to put a straight edge on it and clamp it down. So we gave up, and I'm going to move on to cutting the bottom of the door. And we'll circle back around to the sides when everything else is done and I have to deal with it. So Patrick helped me set my straight edge, but when we clamped it on, it actually bowed out in the middle pretty bad, and I was worried that I might go off my line a bit, so I decided that when I cut this, I will keep my other hand on the flat stock just to make sure I can hopefully keep a nice, consistent straight line going across the whole tank. Before I deal with actually cutting the edges, I wanted to tack a couple bolts on, so when I do cut the edges and it tries to, fall in because of gravity, Patrick can hold it for me so it doesn't bend up the corner real bad. and then I have more to fix later because I just let the door fall in. I ended up deciding that I'm just gonna freehand it. I'm halfway decent at cutting a straight line, plus I'm going to be putting an outside trim on the door, so it'll cover up most of it anyways. Plus I'll go through later and clean up most of the edges so they aren't sharp and, dangerous. Now that I got the door cut, I can get this thing outside to the fire pit. We're gonna toss it in there so I can burn out all of the extra oil, get all the paint burnt off. Then, unfortunately, I'm gonna have to spend a whole lot of time with a wire wheel cleaning the inside of this, and honestly, I'm not looking forward to that, so I'm gonna put it off for a little while and I'll show you how I did the door skins and the handle for the door. For some reason, I thought that I wouldn't light all of the stuff under the tank on fire. Well, as you can see, that clearly wasn't the case, and I decided that using the hose to spray everything under it to try and keep it from burning was a good idea. It wasn't. Didn't really help at all. So I just let it all burn, and here we are. After letting the tank burn completely out, making sure all the paint and oil is all gone so it hopefully will be safe for future use, I whatever. I took the tank out of the fire so I could neglect it for a while and move on to showing you what I did for the door. I wanted to brace the door so over time as it heats and cools, it doesn't, peel away from the actual tank and not seal properly. So I'm using 1x1 1/4-inch angles as my brace pieces just to make sure it holds that shape. I am using 1.5 by 1/8 inch flat stock for the trim around the door to, form the seal so when you close it, all the smoke stays in the actual smoker instead of leaking out the sides. I'm gonna go through and tack all the pieces on, and then I'll flip it over and actually weld the top side, the side that you will actually see, and go back later to grind down all the tacks on the underside so when I close the door, all of the tacks don't prevent it from closing as well. But that's down the road, and I'll do that off camera because who really needs to see me grinding down tacks for a little while? So we're just gonna gloss over that and keep putting things together. With the underside all taken care of, the last thing I wanted to do before I put on my pattern for where I'm going to weld is to clamp down where the pieces meet in the corners, because that was a little raised up and I wanted to make sure that everything sat flush, so after I weld it and grind it smooth, it all looks seamless. And now that I got that done, I'm going to move on to putting the stitch pattern where I will be welding the actual pieces to the door. And after I get all that done, I'm going to tack everything, get it welded. Then, for the last thing I'm going to show you today, I am going to show you the fun custom handle that I am making for the smoker. Alright, show of hands, who's actually surprised that I'm using a big chunk of rebar for this handle? Yeah, that's what I thought, nobody, because I have some weird obsession with rebar. But let's be fair, it looks really cool. I like the texture that the metal has. Whatever, you don't like it, go make your own handle. But I'm using 3/4 inch rebar, and I am just bending the ends to roughly 90. I'm not perfect, I'm trying. The cool thing actually that I'm really enjoying about this handle is I am going to put 2 Pew Pew pandas on the ends of the handle that my friend Michael was kind enough to burn out for me. And to try to make sure they're even with each other, I'm tacking this piece of flat stock to the table and just butting them up to it, hopefully keeping it even. Grab my square to try and make sure that the rebar sits at a 90. I'm not going to put the handle on right now. I'm going to wait till I install the door pretty much at the end of this build. I don't know exactly how I am going to like the angle of it sitting on the door right now because the door's not attached. So instead of guessing, I'm just gonna wait till I actually have the door on to make sure that I'm happy with the way the handle sits on the actual door. That'll do it for today's video. If you liked what I did here, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you can follow along with the rest of the build. For everybody else who's already subscribed, thanks for coming back. I appreciate you.